Hey, what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it. Let's start talking a little Arkansas. As, like I said, dove into that Arkansas BYU film beginning to end and felt like I learned a lot about this Arkansas team. There is some sort of inexplicable stuff, but I feel like you have some very distinct advantages. Jake, I don't know about you, but I came away very unimpressed with Arkansas's defensive line. They don't look small or anything. Like if you just saw them, eye test, like okay, they have pretty good size, but they showed an almost complete inability to affect the game with just them. They were having to add people if they wanted to get any pressure on Keaton Slovis. For the second game in a row, I expect LSU's offensive line to dominate.
And remember, BYU have been struggling coming into that point as well. So It's not like BYU has this stout offensive front. They lost a couple of draft choices or NFL guys over the last couple of years. And a school like BYU, you lose something like that, it's hard to replace, and it shows up on tape. And
their right tackle's no good.
And they've been struggling.
Their left tackle's awesome.
They've been struggling to run the football.
Yeah.
BYU has, which is crazy because they've always been able to run the football, be more physical. But when you're talking about the Arkansas defensive line, like this is not like a really good offensive front that they just win against either.
No, I think BYU, like I said, they got a really good left tackle. I like the left guard. Their right tackle doesn't seem really good at all. But
I believe the right tackle for BYU, if I'm not mistaken, slid over to the left from a year ago.
Yes, it's that guy that, remember, we talked about on the Freaks list before the season. Yeah. He's the guy that could reach like 23 miles an hour, and he's like 6'8". He's like one of the top NFL prospects. But again, so their left tackle, fine, whatever. The point is, you have two great tackles on this LSU line. And you're training a third in Lance Hurd, who, again, I don't think we talked about Lance too much in the film review. I thought from last week, Hurd, it clearly looked like you see all the potential. It's still great, but it's still a work in progress. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Miles Frazier still represents your best five out there right now with the rotation, so guys stay fresh into the fourth and whatnot. So, look, I think LSU's line should dominate, and then by extension, Jake, I'm expecting just another huge game out of the offense. Like, I think that Arkansas, unless they're just going to change because they did this for a matchup standpoint, they seem to want to play a lot of man in this game. And like I said, if they wanted to try to generate pressure, they had to add numbers, so it kind of made them fall into man. I mean, it kind of forces your hand, I guess, a lot of times. But, I think the opportunity for explosive plays will be there the same way that they were this last game. And Jaden Daniels should be willing to trust his receivers to win those one-on-ones and should have the protection to deliver the throw like he did last week.
Looking at the breakdown, as you mentioned, a couple of man coverages. I mean, they played cover one, which is a man coverage 27.1% of the time. They played two-man 8.5% of the time, so we're already talking about 35% man at this point already, and quarters 20% of the time. So, I mean, another 3.4% on man. So they're trusting their defensive backs. I mean,
Dwight McLaughlin, one of them.
Look, it's 40% right now. Just last game, they played man against BYU. Now, how much of that was because they had the advantage they felt like against BYU? Are they really going to try to go play cover one, two-man, all these coverages against Malik Neighbors?
Well, so that's where it gets interesting, right? Because if they felt like they had an advantage against BYU, it didn't end up playing out that way. Yep. Like BYU's receivers won in very big moments. And so if I'm just game planning, it's like, no, I would not want to play man against Malik Neighbors and Chris Hilton and Brian Thomas, especially not after what I saw last game. But Jake, I would ask you, how much of it do you think is just that's their identity, right? Because you can't just get away wholesale from what you do. And so I wonder, and to be fair, what do you think? Have you seen Jaden? Do you think he's struggled more against zone than man this year?
I mean, I would think man coverage with his receivers would be an easier situation.
I think so too, but then it's like I also feel like he's done a pretty good job.
Well,
in this last game of finding those.
Yeah,
holes.
because he's played really well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know, so it's not like it's got one coverage that's going to be better than him against the other right now because he's in that zone and they'll be aggressive. But again, like we're going back and we're trying to figure out, okay, who are they going to be in this game? You have to remember they've had the advantage in every game they've played: Western Carolina, Kent State, BYU. And so you go back and you see a lot of two-man, you see a lot of cover one and different things. It's like, okay, well, are they really going to do that against LSU? Or is it going to be more of what they ran kind of in the fourth quarter once you mentioned BYU's receivers started to have some success and they started to go to quarters coverage?
Okay.
So that, to me, tells me that that's probably something that they would start in against LSU and not go straight. Look, if they go man across the board, and you're LSU, you're loving it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you do because I think that out of the four defensive backs, you're going to have the advantage on all of them and certainly on three of them.
Yeah, and so I think that Arkansas, and this is where Arkansas gets put in a tough spot then, Jake, because what you just said, it's not ideal to go man because, like you said, you should have advantages in at least three of those matchups. You then combine that with if your front four can't get pressure by rushing LSU's offensive line, which I think they will struggle to do, well, then what do, right? Do you add numbers and test those matchups that you don't feel great about? Do you sit back and let Jaden Daniels have all day to kind of sort things out and figure things out? Early on against BYU, they were bringing a lot of numbers on third and longs and trusting those matchups.
Yeah.
Mississippi State tried that against Jaden Daniels last week. They got burned. And then they started dropping into coverage, and they still got burned. So Arkansas, again, I love for the second week in a row the offensive matchup with LSU here. I wonder about the running game because it does seem like BYU ended up having a bit of success on all, and they run a lot of
not this year at all.
Yeah, but they run a lot of gap scheme like powers, counters, hobos, stuff like that. LSU doesn't do a lot of that.
No, doesn't do any really.
So I wonder, like, I mean, I think the offensive line is good enough to just straight up just like zone block them. But I guess I'm trying to put my finger on exactly how I think the running game will do. I think it should be very successful, especially with the emergence of guys like Logan Diggs. But it's just a completely different running style than what Brigham Young University was bringing to.
Yeah, it's not to say you can't. I mean, this offensive line, these running backs, they know how to run a gap scheme run.
Yeah,
certainly Mike Denbrock knows how to draw one up. And so if you see something, and you know, T, you get there on Monday, the coaches have already broken down, gotten the game plan together on Sunday, and all of a sudden on Monday you're putting in a power. Or you're putting in whatever gap scheme run that you want to. I think this unit certainly could handle that. So
the Florida game 3 years ago, different staff, but never seen anything like it.
How many times it was like 14?
It's like
it might have been more.
They went from just doing zone left, zone right to running just counter
and set the school record for rushing yards in a game. And literally, Florida was like, "I'm tired of tackling number 3. Can y'all please get this game over with?" So yeah, that can be done. I'm still interested in how much Arkansas. So I looked it up while we were talking run game there. And in cover one, I think most of you would know that it's a defense that's man across the board with one single high safety. They've played that 45% of the time on defense. Because I went back and I added the first 2 games as well. 45% of the time they've played cover one.
They like McLaughlin and those DBs.
They do. I mean, otherwise you don't play that. Even if you're playing a opponent that you think there's no way they're going to have an advantage, still to play it 45% of the time, it's kind of who you are.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? And so I think that it's going to be tough for Arkansas to suddenly change that this week. And again, I think you're just kind of screwed anyway when I think this LSU offensive line should dominate for the second week in a row. Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.